morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to see so many people here to join us for this briefing session to mark the publication of this year's Top 10 Emerging Technologies report. My name is Fred Fenter, and I'm the Chief Executive Editor at Frontiers, the open access scientific publisher based in Lausanne in Switzerland. And we are the co-publisher of the report, again for the third time, with the World Economic Forum. This event is being live streamed, so welcome to all of you who have joined us remotely. And I invite all the participants this morning to engage on social media with their impressions and their reactions with the hashtag #AMNC25. This report has a long track record of success in identifying the technologies on the verge of making a substantial breakthrough. These are not just promising directions of research, they are innovations at a key inflection point, ready to provide real-world impact. I think we have an outstanding report this year, and I'd like to start by giving a word of thanks and congratulations to Bernie Meyerson and Maria Di Cristina, the two co-chairs of the steering committee, who with lots of empathy but also with a firm hand made sure that the steering committee got the job done. So this is the third report for which Frontiers and the World Economic Forum have worked together on this collaboration. At Frontiers, our college of chief editors across our journal portfolio were involved in each stage of the preparation of the report. And I thank them, and I also thank personally Jeremy and his team at the World Economic Forum for the excellent work accomplished. The technologies this year, as we'll see, cluster around themes of energy, health, information technology, and sustainability. But also, we will see that these selected technologies also interlink and complement each other in interesting ways. Just as in the past, the report itself consists of the core technologies, articles that describe the core technologies, but these articles are enhanced by transformation maps that are provided by the World Economic Forum, which were developed in close collaboration with the chief editors on the Frontiers editorial boards. This year, the report is expanded with strategic outlook assessments from the Dubai Future Foundation, which invites readers to consider these technologies in a broader context. Finally, the report provides an ecosystem readiness analysis, which evaluates how prepared the societal infrastructure is for these technologies to scale and to achieve their projected impact. So overall, a very rich report providing insight into these key technologies from a variety of conceptual frameworks. So it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists for this morning's discussion. We have joining us this morning Professor Katherine Daniell, who is Director of the School of Cybernetics at the Australian National University in Australia. Katherine brings her deep expertise in systems integration and trust technologies. We have, again this year, Professor Sang-Yup Lee, who is Senior Vice President for Research and Distinguished Professor at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in the Republic of Korea. Professor Lee is a world-renowned expert in biotechnology and sustainable processes. And we have also Mr. Jeremy Jurgens, Managing Director of the World Economic Forum, who will speak to the innovation and business implications of these technologies. So let's get started. We'll jump right in with a first question for Jeremy. So Jeremy, this is the 13th edition of the report. If you just taking a step back and taking sort of a wide view, what is the big story? What is the bigger story that we're seeing? And then is there anything that stands out in terms of what you were able to read in this year's report?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And also thank you, as you mentioned, to our Advisory Council of Frontiers as a partner, and also Dubai Future Foundation there. We brought this work together after interviewing over 250 experts, reviewing scientific journals, and assessing against novelty, impact, and depth for each of the technologies, and then to try and understand their maturity. And I think the big message that came out is actually one of convergence. What we're seeing today is combining existing technologies in new ways. We see the underlying advances that are taking place in each of those technology domains, the kind of combinatorial power of these technologies coming together. And so what we do see is actually new kind of combinations that honestly were unimaginable 13 years ago when we launched the report. I think we would have guessed the kinds of technologies that we're seeing today. It would have been very hard to see, but the pace has been so rapid. I think you highlighted some of the key areas that come out. I think it's just worth it reinforcing. One, there's definitely a cluster around integration in energy and materials. So everything coming together in that space. Dr. Lee is an expert on biotech for human health, sustainable industrial processes, so new technology that will actually help us address some of the environmental challenges that we see today. And last is on trust and safety in a connected world. And so when you look at each of the technologies individually, you see these kind of four themes coming together under a big umbrella of convergence.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. So let's get right into the meat of the report, and we'll take up one of the themes that Jeremy just raised. Sang-Yup, three of these technologies, several of these technologies actually are bio-inspired, either directly or indirectly. What can biology accomplish today that seemed impossible 13 years ago or just a few years ago?
Well, a lot of changes have been made over the last decade with respect to biotech. And this year's top 10 selection, I think, contain about 4 bio-related technologies. And now I think we can open it. So particularly, I was interested in 3 of them. So first one is engineered living therapeutics. What that means is that you are probably familiar with CAR-T therapy for cancers. Although expensive, works well. But here in this technology, we are talking about bacteria engineered to sense human disease state, and based on that disease state, bacteria makes medicine on site and cure or treat the disease. What that means is that it can actually save about 70% of drug cost, which is needed for purification and shipping, all the logistics, cold chain when needed. So all these problems are gone. And actually human bodies with those engineered microbes are medicine factory inside your body. So that was the technology I was interested in. And another biotech related topic was GLP-1 receptor agonist for treating neurodegenerative disease. So as you know, GLP-1 glucagon-like peptide-1 receptor agonists are blockbuster drugs. 2 companies in the world, their stock price skyrocketed, as you know. And 10 years from now, the market size of this anti-obesity drug will reach more than $30 billion at least. And because now they are starting to show slowing down your neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and also cardiovascular disease, many effects are being found, which means that it's going to fundamentally change how we think about these biological medicines. So GLP-1 or GLP-1 receptor agonists are designed to be metabolic or metabolism-related hormone. Now these are linked to neurological disorder treatment. So basically all the application opportunities are open, and we are happy to see that it actually works because we do not have good Alzheimer's treatment drugs yet. So that's another important and interesting technology. So technology I was interested in was actually the work I also have been working on. That's green ammonia production. So what does biotech to do with the green ammonia production? The name doesn't say it. Well, you know, ammonia is still being produced by the process called Haber-Bosch process. So that involves use of nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen as a raw material because it has N. But as you know, N2 is a triple bond, very stable chemical. So it is very difficult to convert. So catalytic conversion is needed, but only at very high temperature, like 400, 500 Celsius, and also very high pressure, such as 150 atm, and use a catalyst. And also you need hydrogen to make NH3, which is ammonia, which is used for fertilizer. And if we didn't have Haber-Bosch process, we probably have only half of the food we are enjoying nowadays, which means that we are all starved. No food at the reception today. So what we're trying to do is here Haber-Bosch process, if you make one molecule of, say, 1 ton of ammonia for fertilizer, you generate about 2.4 tons of CO2, greenhouse gas. Also, it uses about 1.7% of world energy to manufacture because very highly energy intensive. So can you make it more green? That's where biotech plays. So for example, in my lab, we use the bacterium called Azotobacter, which contains nitrogenase enzyme that converts nitrogen to ammonia, but at low efficiency. So we want to provide the redox power, and that's done through using quantum dots. That's in vivo synthesized in the bacteria. Maybe I'm going too detailed. But anyways, so I'm just, showing off that we can do it. But we probably can talk about the some pros and cons of using all these biotech-based technology later. Yeah.
Well, saying, I think what you're showing is your passion for this. This is the solution. But I mean, let's step back again. You started by talking about the engineered living therapeutics. Why is now the right time to be talking about this technology, and just pragmatically, how might this change the lives of people who might be walking into a hospital or a clinic, let's say a year or 3 years from now?
Okay, 1 or 3 years, you're not going to see too much changes, I would say. But let's assume 5, 10 years from now. However, if you look at the speed of advances in AI, maybe what you said as a time frame might be correct, 1 to 3 years. But let's safely play as 5 years and 10 years from now. I think when you are going to clinic, or I'm going into the clinic, I'll probably be wearing a little bit different looking watch that senses almost everything of my body, including, say, not only blood pressure, but also metabolite concentration, not only glucose, but other metabolites, and also even cytokine or hormone levels. And then doctors do not need to ask me, because he was given with the permission to in situ look at my data, because he's my doctor. And then he says, I think you need to take this pill. And 1 time is okay. Why? Because this pill contains engineered living therapeutics that takes care of the unusual symptoms my watch showed. So instead of now continuously taking drugs or pills every morning, for example, you take 1 pill that's basically medicine factory inside your body. So it saves a lot of different things. And furthermore, it's going to be good for the countries where these medicines are not economically available, and then they can benefit from such technology advances. Now, in the future, looking into the future, I think these will basically revolutionize the way of medicine is being made. And I'm not saying that this is the only solution and the ultimate solution, because there's a lot of problems. We are talking about bacteria injected into our body either through orally or intravenously. And as you know, intravenous injection of bacteria means it can lead to sepsis and your death. So a lot of safety issues have to be taken care of, but it has potential to treat even cancer, tumor, and also metabolic diseases. So I think in future you will see some of those at least in good shape.
Yeah. So just 10 technologies, but so much to talk about. Yeah, so Katherine, let's move over to you, and let's talk a little bit about trust and intelligence in a connected world. A number of these technologies, collaborative sensing, generative watermarking, autonomous biochemical sensing, a lot of these are laying the groundwork for new kinds of trust, a need for new kinds of trust. So what types of change do you see in society as these technologies gain some traction?
Thanks. So I think one of the really interesting things about these technologies, like Professor Lee was talking about, is there's quite a lot of convergence between them. So when you think about the collaborative sensing mechanisms, we can imagine in our cities and in our transportation networks, we're likely to have a whole lot of different autonomous and Internet of Things systems that are all interrelated also with what's on our physical person. So I think we're going to see, for example, with the collaborative sensing, different ways of being mobile in our environments. I think we're going to see safer areas where, you know, if you're a pedestrian, a car will note where you are, a scooter will note where you are. There will be mechanisms like we already have in some of our vehicles that will stop us, that will move us, that will enable us to navigate uncertain environments in a more connected and intelligent fashion. I think when we think about the autonomous biochemical sensing, that relates very much to what Professor Lee's talking about in terms of the opportunities for personalisation of medical treatment, but also about safety and trust in supply chains and being able to pick up contamination in, say, environmental areas, in food systems throughout the whole process. One of the advantages of these kinds of sensing technologies is that they can give us a signal before there's a big outbreak. So if you can imagine very low levels of contamination, say in a water system or in a particular factory, might allow us to get that traceability and to maintain safety for the populations in an easier way. And then that third one around the generative watermarking, I think misinformation was one of the largest risks in the recent WEF risk report. And so this is one way that a whole lot of technology companies and governments are thinking about, well, how can we address the challenges of artificial intelligence and bring back some ideas about authenticity, about how we can trust and verify the kinds of information we're seeing. So there are lots of really good advances that have been made there. There are some significant challenges as well. There's a bit of a cat and mouse game going on between how those watermarking technologies can also be removed by AI systems, but I think there's some real opportunities there to increase trust and usefulness of these kinds of technologies across our society.
Yeah, and just to follow up quickly, in terms of this, the uptake of collaborative sensing, can you just take a minute and tell us a little bit about what that might mean for transportation specifically?
Yeah, I think, look, transportation is one where we're already seeing these kinds of technologies in place. You see traffic lights talking to cars, talking to vehicles and others. I think what's going to be more interesting is actually seeing how there's a whole lot of other sort of intelligent cybernetic environments where these technologies will also be at play. In a place like Australia, we're seeing a convergence between, say, satellite detection of fire strikes, for bushfires, also working with drones to identify underneath a leafy area where a fire's started, and that then enables collaboration with emergency services to put those fires out really fast to support with biodiversity conservation and trying to reduce loss of human life and infrastructure. So I think we're seeing these across a really broad range of areas, not just transportation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Katherine. And you know, one more question before we move on to the interaction with the audience. This is one also for Jeremy. Let's talk a little bit about timescales for the implementations of these different technologies. Which of these do you see as technologies that will become available, let's say, on a 1 to 3 year time scale relative compared to those that might only become sort of scalable on a 10-year time scale?
Yeah, well, thank you. We heard from the panelists, I think the collaborative sensing, we see it deployed, and what we can anticipate is it's going to be rapidly scaling and deployed over. I mean, any of you can count how many IoT devices you have on you in person right now. than in your household, in your larger environment. And now having those devices actually starting to talk to one another, understand each other, and supported by agentic services underneath, that's already in place, and we'll see that rapidly emerging. The other one we heard is on green hydrogen, ammonia plants, massive consumers of energy. There are plants that are being deployed today, and we see this is maybe one of the fastest areas in the hard-to-abate sectors where we see a scaling. And that'll later be followed by green steel, green cement, but I think green ammonia is one of the ones we're already seeing in place today being deployed. If we look a little bit further out, I'm personally really fascinated with these advanced structural batteries. So, rather than having the battery in your phone, the case is actually the battery. And your car today, if you have an electric car, the battery sits underneath, but the battery can actually be built into the frame. This will lower the weight of the vehicle, allow you to get a longer range, more efficiency, and we'll start to see increasing amounts of embedded batteries in our ecosystem. I think congratulations China. I think they had a peak deployment of 93 gigawatts of solar in May. I think more than any other country put in production. Now you'll need batteries to store all of that solar power being generated, and we'll see these just being built into our basic environment. The other one I'd also just like to highlight is around advanced nuclear. We're starting to see small modular reactors being deployed. And I visited earlier this spring the site for a fusion plant in the United States, which they hope to have the first test reactor operational. I think commercially this is still several years out, but we already see these technologies being deployed. And maybe the last is on the GLPs for neurodegenerative diseases. I think this is also a couple years out. But again, I think this is an important area, and I'd recommend everybody, you need to continually monitor what's going on, because the assumptions you made about what's possible today based on what you looked at last year, the year before, are already out of date. So you have to continuously monitor, you have to pilot, and I'd also say, don't expect to be able to do it all on your own. Look for partnerships, look, whether with universities, with other organizations, to accelerate your capabilities, to be able to unlock these new opportunities from these technologies.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. We have time now, perhaps 5 minutes or so for a couple of questions from other participants. I don't know if we have a microphone that can be used, but yes, please. Or yeah, do we have?
We have a mic coming up from the back there.
Okay, fantastic. So, voila.
Thank you. I'm reporter with Shanghai Eye. My question goes to Jeremy. It's a given that the global environment for innovation is growing more complex now. What do you think are the reasons behind that? And is it slowing down the tech development around the world a little bit currently?
Yeah, so we are in an extremely complex environment around geopolitical, economic, and technological competition. If anything, I would actually argue that this is accelerating innovation. So this is presenting new constraints in different markets, and in the attempt to address these constraints, we actually see companies bringing new solutions, new innovations. Of course, it's a hindrance. It does slow some things down in different areas, but we also see a kind of innovation element that's emerging from some of this friction as people try to address the constraints.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. And I think we will have time to take at least one more question.
One question for the Professor Lee. I'm from the Xinhua News. Why the new technology have the great potential, they also bring the regulations gap and the risk. How can we use their wise to benefit the humanity?
Yeah, so whenever new technologies or emerging technologies come up, of course you have to consider very seriously the potential risks. And that's mainly duty of the government. And that's why government exists. People's safety and environmental safety, that has to be secured. So In the area of biotech, obviously we are dealing with human body, so you need to be very careful. And those technologies I mentioned, for example, GLP-1 for neurodegenerative disease, it is clearly showing clinical benefits of slowing down Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Then obviously it will be needed by many people. So regulation should not be too strict to prevent any testing, right? So it should be undergoing under safe rules for active safe testing. On the other hand, engineered living therapeutics case, you need to be very careful because, as I said, you are either orally taking or intravenously injecting living bacteria. And you do not know exactly the fate of these, and if they propagate, basically you're dead. So you don't want to more aggressively test these things, and there should be proper regulations with the proper test bed setting to make sure that what you are doing is not doing harm to the people. So all these regulations should be considered while not preventing too much to reduce the potential benefits. That's sort of the summary of what I can say.
I think we have time to squeeze in one more question.
This is really very enlightening, sir. I'm Joan Collar. I'm from Marsh McLennan, and we deal with risk and strategy. I'm just bewildered and completely impressed by these emerging technologies. And I guess it's a question to any one of you who can take this. How's the insurance industry stepping up to support this? Because it's emerging. You talked about some of the challenges. I can't imagine some of the insurance industries like stepping up to support that. So I'm just curious in terms of what are your anticipation?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think, particularly in the environmental area, we're seeing a lot of step up from the insurance industry when we think about the challenges with climate disruption and where some of these technologies are going to play a role, whether that's in the collaborative sensing and trying to make some of these systems more efficient. We are seeing quite a lot of interest. I think also looking at all of the energy technologies that we hear, we haven't yet talked about the osmotic power systems. I think there's a whole lot of opportunities to think about how we use particular environments in different ways. So, for example, you may be able to use used desalination water with other seawater to be able to make energy in coastal areas where there are all sorts of challenges and people are having to move away from those areas. It provides potential economic means for those groups. So I do think there's real potential with this set of technologies for insurance companies to be looking at their portfolios around the world to understand what is the convergence between our energy systems, water systems, technology systems, all of the underlying infrastructures that are going to be required. For example, in the collaborative sensing, we need ultra-low latency networks. What's that going to look like in places where they could be impacted also by climate extremes, heat waves, all sorts of other issues? So I really do think it's part of convening those conversations and making sure that the insurance industry is one of the actors at the table.
Katherine, thank you very much. And unfortunately, we're getting very close to the end of our 30 minutes. 10 technologies, 30 minutes. That's 3 minutes per technology. So I think we've done a pretty good job in terms of giving an oversight. You have a summary sheet on your chair. So I think some of the key words that came up today are trust and convergence. We are truly seeing a convergence in this emerging technology, and we're seeing how these different technologies will be working together in a virtuous cycle of technological progress, linked together by a platform approach and very often empowered by AI. The full report is currently available on the World Economic website, so I invite you all to go and download a copy. We'll be taking a deeper dive into a number of these technologies over the next 3 days. So please look at the program and join us at the various hub sessions. For example, there's one already this morning at 11 o'clock at Hub A on the engineered living therapeutics. So with that, I invite you all to give a round of applause to our panelists, Jeremy, Sang-Yup, and Katherine. And thank you very much for joining us this morning.